Mountains. We're going to the east slope of the Steens Mountains where the Alvert Desert is, and the wildflowers have just begun to poke their heads up through the desert floor as we reach there. The Indian paintbrush of a few different shades of colors are blooming quite well now. The arrowleaf balsa root is starting to bloom, giving their yellows to the surrounding area. The purple common lupin is blooming quite well in some of the protected areas. The death camas is sticking its single spike of flowers skyward on some of the barren areas of the desert floor. Some larkspur is sticking its poisonous blossoms skyward right on the edge of a wash. It may be pretty, but look out for it. Down below is the hot springs. I'm up on the hill, and there's our camp. We have the little trailer which we haul our Honda four-wheeler in, back it out, and what a nice place to sleep. We get on the Honda four-wheeler and move up and see one of the old mining shacks above us. Then we go up to where the thunder egg patch is. Marge wants to find her some thunder eggs. The soil here is almost solid thunder eggs. We can see their sort of round shapes everywhere, and some stone crop blooms magnificently right in the edge of the thunder egg patch. We've ridden our Honda four-wheeler up here, otherwise it would take us a half a day to hike up here, and we park it right on the foothills of the Steens Mountains and look around for some of the wildflowers. I go up to where there's a rattlesnake den to see if the snakes are out yet. I get there, I see one little fella peeking out of the den, but that's not a rattlesnake. I think it's too cold yet for the rattlesnakes. He was kind of a shy little snake, and when I got closer, he sucked his head back down in the den. He's probably there enjoying the warmth of the rattlesnakes. I walk up where there's sort of a tramway, where they ran their ore carts down, sort of a track. The old cable's still there. This is some of the Wesson brothers' legacy, this old mine. All their equipment was handmade. Old wheels make good pulleys. This big rock makes a good tail hold for the cables. And I climb up this very steep bank, get up on top of a little point here, and walk around, and there it is, the Wesson brothers' old Mercury mine. I look down in there. There's an old wooden ladder down in there yet, but I don't think I'll crawl down there, especially since I'm alone. Marge doesn't seem to like to go to the rattlesnake den, so she's down below taking pictures. Part of the old structure that was on the front of their mine. This was one of their methods of operation. They always put a structure on the entrance to their mine. Some of the old homemade pulleys are still here with the cables where they pulled the mercury up from down in the mine and then slid it down the hill and had a furnace
right
down
back
there
in the
to
mountain
work it
on
over.
that same fault, but it looks like it's just entirely too unstable to try to go in.
I go back, start the Honda up, and start going down the road. Marge is down below taking pictures. I don't know why she doesn't want to come up and get pictures of the rattlesnake den, but I guess I'll have to go back there later when it's warmer and see if those rattlesnakes are out. Down below us, we see the little shack where the Mercury miners lived. We carefully drive down the road and check it out around the old mining shack. Back behind the mining shack, we find one of the furnaces where they heat the rock, and then the mercury would melt out of it, and they'd put this mercury in vials and sell it. The old shack looks as if it's just ready to fall down at any time, but the old furnace looks as if it's going to be here for a while. And of course, in the tradition of the old miners, most everything's made of old car parts and rock. That's the two things that they seem to have an abundance of around all the old mines. We get on the Honda and move on down to the playa. We want to go down on the playa while it's reasonably nice out and see if those mysterious moving rocks have moved this year. Past a few clumps of the arrowleaf balsa root as we head for the playa. We race across the playa and find that the moving rocks have moved. Even very small ones have moved, leaving a big trail. We're guessing they were either frozen ice or pushed ahead ice, because that rock is too small to leave a trail like that. These moving rocks have puzzled scientists and laymen alike, how they could move and leave those trails. There were all kinds of theories. Some of the original theories were that these rocks were moved by the magnetic flow of the earth, and it pushed them across the playa, leaving these trails. Then there was the theory that maybe somebody from outer space came and pushed them around. And then scientists study them, and finally the theory was developed, which I buy, that they were moved by the wind. Sometimes ice played a big part in it, like we see a number of scratches here, similar to what the rocks make, but there's no rock at the end of it. So that indicates that these were probably made by ice itself. Maybe some of it got crumpled under and was pushed ahead. Then the ice melted and there's nothing at the end of the trail. But this trail here looks like it's got a really nice moving rock on it, and it was probably pushed by ice too. They're just plain not big enough rocks to have made that kind of trail without the help of ice. It's not every year these rocks move on the Alvord Desert, so when they do, I make the best of it. I'm totally fascinated by this phenomena of nature, which has probably gone out here ever since there's a playa. You can notice some of the trails are straight and others move all around, so that would indicate that it's moved in a number of days, with the wind pushing it in different directions each day. Back to the hot springs to warm up a little bit. The hot springs is piped into some old pools that were made in the 1930s by some European. They put him up at the Alvord Ranch, fed him and gave him a place to sleep, and he built these pools. There's still old washer and dryer tubs in the bottom of these pools, which serve very well as seats. Some of the old original tin is gone, and the old person that used to take care of the hot springs, Carl, who was so dear to so many, his picture is still there, even though he's no longer around, but he touched so many lives in a positive manner. We couldn't get away from the hot springs that evening. It was so nice, and we had some food in the spring cooking. So when it was done, we ate our dinner out of the hot springs, but then the next morning, Marge and I take to the Honda four-wheeler, and we're going out across the playa and check for the moving rocks again, only this time we're going a lot farther than just the playa. we're going clear past the end of it and out to where there's an old homestead. We're leaving a trail of dust in our wake as we buzz across the playa at about 45 miles an hour. There's plenty of clouds hanging over the Alvord Desert and the Steens Mountains, so we're probably going to have some more squalls later on, and it's plenty chilly. The Steens Mountains are capped with some pretty white snow right on the summit of them, and that snow later on will melt, taking most of the summer, and that's furnishing water for the hot springs, for all the other springs and creeks in the area, and even a little excess for irrigation at the Alvord Ranch. So that's like money in the bank, snow in the mountains. And also the cattle enjoy watering in these springs coming down off the Steens Mountains. And some of them are ice cold unless they've been down real deep and got heated by the volcanic molten rock down below, and then they move up as hot springs. The Pueblo Mountains south of us have a cap of snow. We can't help but stop and look at this very nice moving rock with its trail. Move from afar across the playa of the Alvord Desert. Past the end of the playa and then up through a sagebrush mound here as we head southward toward the old homestead site. Over the mound, our tiny gasoline motor pushes us southward. When we get over the mound, then we drop into a valley, a flat, ancient lake bed that's pretty much flat, only it's almost like a playa, only water doesn't set on all of it, so it's not really a playa. You'd need water in some of these little desert brushes. Some chilly squalls are still on the horizon as we move across this huge valley floor at a pretty good pace, although it's kind of rough here, so we can't go nearly as fast as we could across the Alvord Desert.
I started walking through this place and stepped in quicksand, and I really went in. I sunk in there clear above my knees, and I managed to get down and crawl out of it on my hands and knees. It was kind of scary for a minute there. There's my tracks where I sunk through. Right in the tree is some kind of a big bird's nest, but I haven't seen any birds around, and I don't know what it is. Part of it's caved off. It looks like they've been rebuilding it every year. Another nest in that tree, and another alongside it.
We go to the old homestead site at Tule Springs. We see all kinds of tules, cattails, and also sedges around there. The old homesteaders had built ponds, and I don't know what they were for, but they had a purpose, I'm sure. The old homestead shack here was made of low-grade agate. I call it the agate house, even though it has fallen down into hardly recognizable ruins. This was called home for someone. I understand it was that the last person that lived here was a man that lived here by himself, right out with the Steens Mountains in the background, and he broke horses for a living. I understand that he left about the time of World War II, but I haven't heard what happened to him, whether he went to war and never came back, or what the story is. I just plain don't know. But he left the legacy of the old agate house behind him, and it looks as if he could have had a little irrigation for a garden and maybe a little pasture for his horses, and he probably made hay out of some of the coarse grasses of Tule Springs. I go up along the edge of the springs and I see several of these ponds, and it looks like they're a good place for ducks to swim now. Every time you come along here, you see ducks come boiling out of these ponds. The old juniper fence, some of these old original fence, still stands with the snow-capped mountains in the background. What a paradise this must have been to live in. We go up the agate mine. I take my telephoto lens and look out across the desert. I see some movement ahead of me. I look at it for a while and determine it's an old beef cow and a calf walking up the road at a pretty good pace. I don't know what in the world scared her, but she and her calf are getting out of there. After the cow gets about out of sight, cut off by a cliff, I look out farther, and there he is. The sorrel stallion is out there again this year. That magnificent, pretty, old, large sorrel stallion, one of the wild horses of the sheepshead herd. And he's got him a little harem of mares there, and I see that he even had a brand new colt this year. How special to be able to see the sorrel stallion and his harem out here on the desert once more. We're a long ways from these horses, and they have no idea that we're around. When we finally got down closer to them, the mare and colt were no longer there. I think the colt was a little too small to run with the other horses, so she chose to just go stand and hide someplace when we went down later. But first, Marge wanted to see if she can find some agates here on this hillside. This hillside has an excellent agate mine with gem quality agates, and Marge always enjoys picking up a few of these really nice agates of various different colors. She's got her a bag with a few of them in it, and she's going to pick up one or two more as she digs through the tailings of this old agate mine. At one time, these agates were mined with a big track hoe, and they were shipped to China to have jewelry made. Then the finished jewelry was shipped back here. The sorrel stallion is grazing over toward the point of rocks with the rest of his mares. We get on the Honda and head down there. And there he is, the magnificent sorrel stallion with the wind blowing his mane. He's never had a rope on him and never been touched by a human hand, and he aims to keep it that way as he proudly trots through the sagebrush with his head high and his tail up to make him look big and intimidated. And he always stands between us and the mares, just in case there's a battle. He's the one that's protecting the mares. The mares peek out from behind the sagebrush before they decide to take to hoof and get out of there. A few tough old desert cattle move out ahead of us as we get over to the windmill. Ranching practices have changed recently, so the windmill's no longer in operation, but the water tank and everything is still here. Oh, the only thing that's wrong is all the fins are gone off the windmill. Past the windmill, on we head, and there goes a little herd of the pronghorn, or commonly known as the antelope around here. But they're not letting any grass growing under their feet. They're heading out through the sagebrush flat, and it looks like there is one buck in that herd. They're built to run, so run they do. Then we spot another herd of wild horses. This isn't the sorrel stallion's harem, this is another harem, but they're soon gone. On the way back, we noticed it's been a little warm today, and these are the first snakes to leave their hibernation dens, and that's the Great Basin Gopher is out laying right along the edge of the road. We had to be careful not to run over him as we head back toward camp. He tests the air with his tongue, which is used to pick up vibrations and also smells. So he's testing the air to see just exactly what we are. These are non-venomous constrictor snakes. We get back to the hot springs when a squall is happening. The water from the rain is coming down in the springs, but who cares? The water's nice and warm, and it sure feels good. We're getting rid of some of that chill we picked up out coming across the desert so fast on the Honda. The spring is being fed by some old irrigation pipe, which in several cases has seen better days, but it still works, piping that hot water into the spring. The minerals soon rust out this, or corrode out this aluminum pipe, and it leaks all over the place, but there's still enough hot water gets in there to feel really good when we're cold. It's almost like a fountain where the water's leaking from the supply pipe. We decide to go up and check the orchard out, past some lupin, and then to the orchard. The plums are blooming really nice. I hope the weather's good enough for pollination. And down below, the peaches are blooming great. The peaches are at high elevation here, higher than they should grow at this latitude, but it's a microclimate from the hot springs and a protected area. So these peaches not only grow, but they thrive, and they're even reseeding themselves. So in the fall, we go over there and pick peaches and have canned peaches. The apples are blooming, and there's cherries there too. This orchard is all part of a legacy left by Mike and Jim West sticking around, coming down off the Steens Mountains and bearing down on us as we hit the playa and buzz back to the hot springs. I noticed Scott's dog looking a little strange. He was lifting his foot and looking at it, and I see why. He'd made a run out here across this super hot mud and burned his feet just a little, but we can see his tracks here, but it just burned a little bit where the hair was, so it never hurt him. Now we're going down, and I'm going to get our food out of the hot springs. Our hot springs is our favorite cooker while we're out here on the desert, and it cooks potatoes to perfection in about 4 hours, and also it's just the right temperature to throw a few cans of canned goods in, and you can leave them in there just as long as you want. The pool isn't hot enough to burst them, and then when you're ready to eat, you just go roll them out, and they're so hot you have to let them cool just a little. But boy, is that the way to cook. No one has to be the cook this way. Just someone has to go down and get the stuff out of the springs. We finish eating, and then I look up, and what a surprise. Two of the guys I used to work with, they were park rangers at the same park where I worked, have showed up here. And so we reminisce a while and look at Sam's pickup and see he's got a tire that's more than just a little bit flat. Ed's brought his little dog along, who looks on while we try to change the tire. Sam crawls under the pickup and jacks it up so we can get that flat tire off there and get his good spare back on and continue doing things around the hot springs. Ed'll loosen the lug nuts, and in no time we'll have that tire off there and the other on as Ed's little dog looks on. Sam's brought his trailer, and so why not go in and have us a feast? We brought some hamburger along, and so we're going to have some spaghetti, and Ed's going to make some garlic bread, and he makes it the right old-fashioned way with real garlic squeezed and put on it and mixed with butter. Sam checks the spaghetti sauce, and it's almost done. So Ed will wrap the garlic bread up, and we'll have a feast fit for a king right here on the edge of the playa of the Alvord Desert. Marge seems to be able to do a lot of talking and a lot of eating, but I'm not sure she's done her share of the work. We're on vacation out here, and who cares? We're having the feast fit for a king, and everything tastes better when you're out here. And you don't have to use real good table manners. We're all amazed to see that we've eaten up almost an entire package of spaghetti. With Ed's little dog looking on, Sam bags up the very few leftovers to put 'em in to have tomorrow. The next morning, the sun is breaking through some clouds again, but it's still going to be cloudy with a few clouds hanging around, and last night it rained like fury, and the desert had mud and water on it, so muddy that if you walk out there, it builds up on your shoes. So we decide to go up to Pike Creek and check on the old juniper that's growing out of a crack in the rocks. It's been growing here for years, and it undoubtedly, even though it's growing in the rock, has its roots down in the soil below. We have to cross Pike Creek here. This place has some of the original bloodstock of the Lahontan cutthroat. They were at one time abundant out in the Alvord Desert when it was a 700-foot deep lake. Now the few that are left have to live here in the little streams that flow into the desert. And these are a very special cutthroat trout. They've evolved where they can withstand the super high alkali content of the desert lakes and the super hot of the sunshine as it bears down on these waters and makes them too hot. They can live where no other fish can. We see buzzards circling around, but they're just out scouting for things. They always check everything out early of a morning to see if there might be a roadkill or if something died. If it did, they'll make a feast of it. The buzzards continue circling as we make it up the trail, 1 foot at a time, looking skyward for the buzzards. By now, the buzzards have soared on, and we're moving up Pike Creek Trail, leaving the playa behind us with a few clouds still in the sky, and it's plenty cold and there are plenty of little squalls moving down off the Steens Mountains as we move farther and farther up Pike Creek. We notice across from us there's some caves all over the place in the cliffs. Arrow-leafed balsa root is blooming in front of us as we examine these caves. Some of these caves were blasted in a little bit by Mercury miners, but others are natural. There's one cave across that seems to have a couple eyeballs in it. That's just openings in the mountain where you can see the sky far out above the Albert Desert beyond us. And more caves. I checked one out on the way up, and it looked like it is just a small hole. Then we see it, a little shack right in the brush, and this was the powder house that the Mercury miners used while they were mining for mercury up here. We smell a sweet aroma and look around a little bit, and it's thousands of currants, wild currants, in full bloom here, and boy do they smell good. We climb up a pile of tailings on the hillside high above Pike Creek, where we find our first evidence of miners of yesteryear. There's a small wooden structure over the entrance to a mine where these mercury miners have blasted it out to get the ore, to melt this ore, and they usually processed it right here and made mercury. During World War II, they were really active because mercury was a decent price then. After the war, a while it went down and they closed their operations. But we look in the mine that's dug deep into the mountain. It goes in the mountain, turns left, and then drops straight down with a rickety wooden ladder. After looking the mine over, it's time for us to go back down again. We take a look at some of the wildflowers along the trail. Then I go up and see these rare lupin in bloom. These are indigenous to this area and unique only to this area. There's just a narrow belt of them runs up